And hello, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between. How the heck are you? I am Diana Clarion, the Lavender Lady, and this is Coffee with Lavender. Get a little bit of coffee or beverage of your choice or whatever you happen to want, and just come on in and sit down and join in. And hello, ladies.
Oh
And
no.
I forgot to turn off my. And hello, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between. I always forget to mute my watch screen because it
That
was
actually might have been me.
no, it was me definitely.
Oh, cool. So it was both of us. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. The darn thing about this is I keep the watch screen up to see what you guys are saying over on the side chat, and it will not let me mute before the stream starts. So I have to be there right there. But I believe that you folks have heard a voice coming from the background, and that is our guest today. Always welcome, always good to have him around. Luciano Gonzalez of Lucianos Logic. How the heck are you?
I'm good. This weekend was a very busy weekend for me. On Friday, I was on the Leah podcast with the always wonderful Christy Santiago and Grace Skeptic Mac. And then yesterday, I spoke at a conference in DC about
Oops.
LGBTQ, non-theism. And now I'm here, and I'm just super excited to be here.
Oh, Danke schön. It's always wonderful to have you. And okay, Mark, is the echoing stopped? Hi, Orla. How are you? Hopefully it has. But I take it then that for the second week in a row, it's amazing. The audio has actually worked right off the bat. Am I finally getting something done right? I don't know. But anyway, this has been one heck of a week. This past Friday, 22nd, Robert Mueller finished his report on. Well, the first thing let's go through, just to make sure everybody remembers what's going on. What was that report? What was that investigation supposed to look at?
So, Robert Mueller was a Republican elected special prosecutor, which means that he is a unique type of public prosecutor that existed outside of the main structure. Okay, apparently we still have echo, which is very strange. That's not from my end because I muted all of my stuff. That's
Okay,
strange.
let me look at this and make sure we're getting there. I'm going to go. Okay, hashtag heathen is not hearing an
Okay,
echo.
so that's odd, huh?
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I am going to proceed. I hope that anyone who hears the echo, it doesn't interfere with your ability to participate in the chat and enjoy what we're going to be talking about today. Well,
Yeah,
enjoy is not the
hopefully.
right word.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of keeps one on pins and needles and that sort of thing because there are many implications. I want to talk to you about a lot of them.
But yeah, so Robert Mueller was a Republican elected special prosecutor, which means, in essence, I'm going to boil down a lot of legalese. So this is going to be a really rough explanation. If we have any people who are legal oriented, I'm sorry. This is not going to be a fun thing for you to hear, but I'm a policy oriented person. So this is me summarizing a lot of different things. Robert Mueller was a Republican elected special prosecutor, which in essence means that he was a prosecutor who was a member of the Justice Department but existed outside of its typical structure. He was elected to go and pursue an investigation into a couple of different things, most specifically two things that have been shorthanded to be collusion, which in essence in this context means the possibility that Trump's allies were involved with Russian interference and worked together with Russia actively to make it so that Trump won the election, which is not the same thing as Russia working to elect Donald Trump. That's a
Aha,
different
yes.
thing
Mm-hmm.
altogether
Yeah.
because every country hopes to influence the United States' elections in one way or another, just like the United States hopes to influence different countries' elections in one way or another. These are not the same thing as a campaign actively working with the government of Russia to get a specific result. And the other big thing was obstruction, which is the thing that I feel the most strongly about.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the idea that Trump affected that Trump tried to either block or interfere with the investigations into the possibility of collusion.
Okay, which is what I had thought it was, and I wanted to make sure that I knew, and I wanted to make sure that anybody listening in knew as well, in case because there's been a lot of confusion about that. It's
Yeah.
exactly what was the investigation about, and what's Donald Trump on the hook for, especially. And the interesting thing is now that the report is done. First thing that happened, or at least as I saw it in the news, I have here from the Washington Press, date line March 24th. Speaker of the House just laid down a serious demand to the Justice Department concerning the release of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report that the Attorney General cannot afford to ignore. Speaker Nancy Pelosi told House Democratic Conference yesterday that she would refuse to accept a redacted confidential briefing about the Mueller report and is going to insist on a full release of its findings and materials. Okay, now that redacted report, as far as I understand, or not even a redacted report, at first it was it a summary that
So
Barr released?
Okay, so what usually happens with these sorts of things, although this sort of thing is fairly rare politically,
Mm-hmm.
special prosecutors are not at all a common occurrence in the United States government. What essentially happened, and this is what's going on right now, is that there was a letter released that contained a couple of the key findings, and what probably will happen is that there's going to be a document released that summarizes the report, but not the actual report. I think that there are people who want to see the public report, which is absolutely the case. There are lots of Democrats and a couple of Republicans, and even Trump himself has said that he has no issue with the report being like public, that he is probably not going to publicly get in the way of the report being released, but Trump is not exactly known for consistency.
Right.
So but he himself has explicitly said that he would like to see the report be publicly released, which is a good sign. I think the report should be publicly released. I have a couple of controversial opinions on this. I don't think that collusion, as we mentioned earlier, collusion being the like active cooperation of the Trump campaign and Russia. I don't think that that happened. I don't think, for a bunch of different reasons, that was a thing that actually happened. But I think that something really close to collusion happened, and there was very obviously an effort by Russia to have Trump elected. And
And
no one should deny that.
yeah,
That's not a thing we have to like say didn't happen.
it appears that Mr. Mueller decided that there was no active collusion. This is true, or
That is the impression we've gotten from William Barr, but William Barr is not an unbiased party, and
yeah.
we shouldn't like I'm not going to say for sure that Barr is telling the truth until the actual report is released publicly or we get a condensed version of the report.
And now here's the interesting thing: what is there to guarantee that a condensed version of the report would resemble in any way the actual report? I mean, I'm old enough to remember Watergate, and I remember the release of the transcript of the tapes, which was a bit problematic as far as many Democrats were concerned at that time, and eventually pretty much everyone. And the smoking gun actually did come out of the tapes. So that was a whole thing about the transcript versus the actual recordings. Do we have any guarantee? I think I know what the answer is going to be, but do we have any guarantee that Mr. Barr is going to release a reasonably accurate summary of the report?
So the only thing that we really have is the idea that the Democrats are going to put pressure on this, which is not a good idea. The Democrats, I'm a member of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've been a Democrat the entire time I've been voting. I'm not dumb enough to pretend that the Democrats are very good at this sort of thing. They're not.
And
Um,
that's something I want to come back to. So finish up. Let's do what you're doing now, and then I'll come back to something a little later.
So the idea, we're probably never going to see the full report for a whole bunch of different reasons. There's a surprisingly good Vox article. I like Vox, but I'm more than willing to admit that they're biased in this particular area. There
Mm-hmm.
is a surprisingly solid Vox article that talks about 9 big questions the public has about the report and gives a couple of different answers to each of the 9 questions. One of them is, will the report become public? And they talk about 3 different big things that obstruct or interfere with that. And that was an unintended just sort of throwback to what we were talking about earlier. But the 3 big things they say is the classified information, which
Mm-hmm.
is the knowledge that there's a ton of classified information in the report that we're going to have to like go through and redact, which is a process that will take some time. Grand jury secrecy, which is the idea that there are laws in place, and there are laws in place that mean that if we ever try to charge people with anything related to this report, then we are going to have to release information that won't prejudice them one way or another.
Right.
And also uncharged conduct. So that is general legalese for the idea that we aren't supposed to publicly talk about individuals that have been decided to not be charged, which that was not good English. If we're not going to
Yeah.
charge someone, we're probably not going to talk shit about them.
Yeah. And are there not open investigations even yet that stemmed from the Mueller investigation that you want to not tiptoe around, but walk carefully around so you don't engage in any prejudicial information or anything like that?
If I'm talking in terms of ones that are active right now, I might be wrong, but I don't know of any off the top of my head. There have been charges related to the Mueller report that we've seen in the past. And these charges aren't actually directly related to what was being investigated. It's just
Okay.
that some people who were being investigated were found to be guilty of other things, which was the thing that happened with Roger Stone.
Okay. Yeah. And then you would want to be careful about what you talked about in the report because you wouldn't want to jeopardize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing I see here, which is very interesting, I'm looking at a CNN politics piece, Dateline 25 March. We have, in interviews since Attorney General William Barr issued his 4-page letter on Sunday, Democrats have refused to accept that determination, meaning the determination that no one conspired with the Russian government, saying there's ample evidence of Trump campaign and Russia contacts that may not have risen to the level of criminal contact. But the next paragraph is the one that is really important to me. But that strategy risks political backlash for the Democrats if they are viewed as overreaching and probing into an area that has already been exhaustively investigated by a special counsel whose investigation turned up no criminal wrongdoing. That sounds to me a lot like the complaints that were made about the Hillary Clinton investigation, that she was investigated over and over and over with no wrongdoing turned up. So why were they continuing? And could they not have that come back in their faces now?
The thing about that is that that's kind of exactly what happened with the Democrats, and it happened in a really dumb way in the Hillary Clinton investigations when at the end of the elections, James Comey came in and it's like, we're investigating the emails again, which is not
Mm-hmm.
actually what was happening.
Right.
It was a little bit more complex than that, and that is, there are some people who believe that that was the thing that won Trump the election. I'm inclined to view that as a reasonable position to hold because it was a really dumb, obviously biased and ill thought out thing to do from James Comey. So that's part of the reason why people in the intelligence community and people who are related to people in the intelligence community aren't always super fond of James Comey, even if we're like, yeah, he was pretty good, but what he did at the end was beyond fucked.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, really.
Like, I don't think that he cost Hillary the election, but I do think that he made it a lot harder for her to win.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But I feel that that's a reasonable position. And I've seen people say that we shouldn't try to impeach Donald Trump, which isn't really a position I agree with. I think that we should be willing to impeach Donald Trump if he actually did something impeachable. I don't think we should run on impeachment. I don't think that's a thing that we should be like, yeah, this is our platform, because that's a bad platform and it's a dumb platform. But if he did do something impeachable, we shouldn't be like, no, we're not going to impeach him. We absolutely should if we want to be consistent.
Yeah, and there comes the possibility of information coming out of the report that was not chargeable, was not indictable, but could some of it be impeachable? Um, I mean, how are you looking at that one?
I think that people who are on the fence about impeachment, if they read the full report, and the full report is as damning as some people think it could be, then I do think some people could be swayed to impeachment. The issue is, I don't know if those people are people in power. I feel
Yeah,
like that might be some voters, but not necessarily like it move the actual people in office. Because right now, my understanding as someone who lives in DC, as someone who occasionally chats with some Congress people, is that there are people who want to see Trump impeached if they can, but they're not going to be crazy about it if it looks like it's an uphill battle.
yeah, because was it Pelosi who said this, or was it someone else that the impeachment is not a judicial process, it is a political process, and the Senate just is not there to have even a shot at conviction. And if you don't get that conviction, you could do more damage than good.
That sounds like something that does sound like something she said. My summary, I remember hearing her say something along those lines, and I remember it a little bit differently. Um, from what I remember, it was a little bit more negative than that, and I remember writing a post about it. I'm like, that's not the right take. The right take is that if Trump did something impeachable, people should try to impeach him for the sake of consistency. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you do something impeachable, you should be punished for it.
Yeah,
And you shouldn't escape, like, you shouldn't also have to wait for it until you're out of office, because that's something that could move a bad person who does impeachable things to try and stay in power for as long as possible.
mm-hmm. And Smitty makes an interesting comment, something I've heard before. Impeaching Trump would be putting Pence in office, a waste of political capital. What I've heard, if I have this correct, it's been a couple of weeks since I've heard this. Um, if you put Pence into office once Donald Trump is removed from office, that's not as much a liability as Donald Trump staying in office and sinking his own ship. Now, the problem I have with this, and come back at me with this whatever way you will, I don't know if, in the eyes of his base, Donald Trump can do any wrong at all. Is he and is he still enough of a darling to his base to get him elected in 2020?
Smitty made another comment after that
Oh,
I'm going to talk about first, and
yeah.
then I'll back to what you said. I agree with what Smitty said just now. Dems need to focus on actually winning the next election
Hmm.
by getting rid of unlikable folks. I don't know if Kamala is unlikable, because I know a lot of folks who are centrists who really like Kamala. It's possible she could win. I'm personally not a big fan of hers. I don't hate her. Not a very good candidate, if you ask me. But I'm a progressive, so
Well, you and
it's
I both.
reasonable that I would not like Kamala.
Hmm.
But I do agree with the basis of that comment that Dems need to focus on actually winning the next election. But I also think we need to focus on being like a good country that cares about justice and does the right thing. And if a president does something that's impeachable, I think we should actually try to impeach them. I think that it matters that we make sure that they're held accountable, because if they're not held accountable, then the Republicans have a good tactic for the next election. They're
Yeah.
like, all right, we can have a horrible candidate who speaks to bigots and who empowers the worst in our base, as long as we have a deeply unlikable, horrifying vice presidential candidate.
Mm-hmm. Hang on a second. Clear the throat here. I have to figure out how to do this correctly with the new microphone. I can't just reach up and hit the kill switch. Um, yeah, this is really what's going to be one of the problems anyway, because as far as I've seen, there are people already talking about let's not even think about 2020. Let's think about 2024 because Trump's going to be a shoo-in in 2020.
That's a horrifying thought. I strongly disagree with that sentiment, but that's also a horrifying thought. If it's accurate, like, yikes, that's
Yeah.
terrifying.
Now, the people from whom I've heard this are not professionals. They're not pundits. They're basic citizens, and a couple of them are not even. A couple of them are Canadian. They're looking at the country from the outside. That may give them a better edge. It may not. I'm not sure. But yeah, that made my blood run cold because I already know that if we remove Trump from office, or if we even remove the entire GOP that is seated in the White House, in the House, in the Senate, that's not going to solve the problem. The problem is the base that's electing these people in the first place. And I think that their position on this report is going to make a big bit of difference. No?
I think that, like, trying to talk, I don't know if any of us really understand Trump's base. I know a lot of people feel like they do. I know I don't, and I'm someone who pays a lot of attention to politics. I'm someone who cares deeply about this because I've seen people who voted for Trump turn around. Like, I've seen people who voted for Trump have what's called buyer's remorse, which
Yep.
is a term I don't like. I feel like it does those people a disservice because a lot of different people voted for Trump. I have no understanding of what his base is. I know that he excited a lot of people who were bigots, people who were white supremacists and stuff, but I know a lot of reasonable people who agreed with Trump one way or another. They had like a specific policy that they liked, even if it was something that actually wasn't specific, like we need to control the border, which is a very unspecific policy that no
Right.
one disagrees with.
Yeah.
Like, no Democrat is saying, yeah, we need to just have no borders. The whole country is, the whole world is America now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I know people who are like, yeah, we need to get rid of corruption in Washington, which is a perfectly fine thing to say. But I always wonder what people think corruption in Washington actually looks like. I feel like if we ask five different people, we'd get five different answers. And I think that's fine. I feel like a lot of us have a different understanding of corruption than other people do. And a lot of us can be right. We can view certain things as corruption, and other people can view other things as corruption, and we can both be right.
Yeah, pretty much. But
But I agree with Bionic Dance that Trump is not a guarantee. I think that that is an important point, and I feel like the idea that we need to focus on 2020 is a very dangerous thought that is not accurate. We need to focus on 2020. Actually, we should probably be focusing like just right now, like on today.
yeah, I mean, we do have the 2019 elections coming up, and
Yep.
those are what you would consider down ballot. I mean, they are not presidential, they are not senatorial or House, but they are very important in the sense that state legislatures, if I remember correctly, a lot of state legislatures get elected in off years. Um, Other elected judgeships, that sort of thing, and a lot of that is red, very, very red. It scares me how red the state legislatures are in this country.
It really is. Whenever people show that dumb map of like how the country supposedly voted in 2016, it's that like I'm sure most of us who are politically engaged have probably seen this map. There was a tweet with it that went viral, but it was this big ass map of the United States, and it was like red in the entire middle. It's actually not very accurate, but it's supposedly a map that shows how the United States voted. And it shows that Trump won like hundreds, if not thousands, of counties throughout the United States. That's not quite what actually happened. And like that map suggests that the United States is just this big red country with lots of like blue on the coasts. That's not actually the way it is. There's plenty of elected Democrats all over the country in every state. Even if usually the off year elections are won by Republicans pretty consistently, which is really disappointing. And the only way we're ever going to actually fix that, and it's important that we fix that, is if we work with Democrats and independent candidates during the off years, and actually during every year, but especially during the off years, to make sure that the state governments are not as red as they tend to be.
Mm-hmm. Because I know that Pennsylvania has a red paint problem. When I have looked at the map, which appears to be reasonably accurate, we have Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Harrisburg, of all places, being islands of blue in a sea of red. And that has led to some problems. The way I'm looking at it right now, and I may have this correct, I may not, we may have Bob Casey as senior senator simply on brand loyalty. And that could be a problem. But yeah, you have other states here in the U.S., and a lot of things are on state level that go as red as that, and that's not a good thing. And I see that Christy Santiago is here. She says, "Hello there, my fellow political junkie. I love these topics." I forget, have you worked with Christy directly?
I did work. So Christy and I have been on several live streams together. The first time we were
Uh-huh.
on a dedicated live stream to just talk to each other was this Friday on the Leah podcast. So yeah.
Okay. It's great to have you here. Um, and I know that we're starting to tend toward the politics of the whole thing, but I guess you can't get away from that. One wants to look at the judicial nature of this whole thing, have wrongdoing accountable, but no matter what happens, it's going to be politics. It's going to be who's in office, that sort of thing. And when you look at that, I'm thinking of something I saw recently, within the last day or two, a meme based upon what something Andy Borowitz had said, which was basically we need to educate the electorate in order to get ourselves out of this problem. How much of a problem is that going to be? Because a lot of well, as far as public education goes, and I know that's not everything he meant, but a lot of that lies in GOP hands. What can we do to try to make that better?
We need to start off by accepting that in the United States, by virtue of the way this country's government is set up, the justice system is not independent. And that's a super edgy thing to say. I know a lot of people are probably going to be annoyed with that, but it's true. Like the US Department of Justice is a cabinet, like the that's a cabinet position. So we elect the president who then selects his cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most important parts of the entire justice system, of the entire judicial system, even, is set up that way. And then we don't elect our Supreme Court justices. We elect the president who picks Supreme Court justices. And then we elect senators who decide whether or not they could live with that Supreme Court justice being in the Supreme Court for pretty much their entire life. Our justice system is not independent, and we have a direct say in how it goes, which can be a good thing if we all actually voted. It's something that could affect and change lives in a good way if we actually cared about this and if we accepted that our judicial system kind of messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way we do justice is weird, and I'm not saying that it's abnormal. I'm saying that objectively, looking at it independently, it's weird. This is not the way the justice system probably should work. I can think of a bunch of different reasons why there are errors in this form of justice, and it's something that we need to fix. But the only way we're going to be able to fix it with the way our country is set up is if we actually get out and vote, and that's hard. people don't want to vote.
And I don't know, one of the ideas I've had, and castigate me if necessary, but the way I've looked at it, I have the feeling that the founding fathers thought that the people who would be involved in government, the people who would be involved in electing or otherwise selecting representatives to government were rational. And I think we all know that rationality is not the strongest human trait. No matter how formally educated you are, you always have some bias going.
It's also important to remember that when this country was first set up, the people who could vote were not all of the people in the country. Not
Right,
not not even remotely. It wasn't even all men in this country.
right.
So like even if you thought that like yeah, guys are rational, they're not.
Hey,
Like
I
if you
tr-
look at history, that just tells you men are not rational. And yeah, that's a mean thing to say. It's also
Oh,
true.
please. I know how true that statement is. Remember, I was trying to be a guy at one time.
But yeah, when this country was first set up, there were different conditions in different places for how you vote. But generally, and especially before the country became a country, back when it was still colonies and there were experiments with something resembling democracy, some of the conditions to be able to vote were you had to be a land owning person who, in some places, went to church,
Hmm.
and also you had to be a white male.
Yeah. Um,
So like now most people can vote. In some places, more people can vote than in others because a lot of people don't realize that in some parts of the country, people who are documented immigrants and who've lived in the country for a long time and have lived in the community for a while are actually able to vote for local elections. They're not able to vote for state level, but they are able to vote for like city council people.
okay, now that's an interesting thing. Even I did not know that offhand. And is that a possible source of the misapprehension that illegal aliens are allowed to vote? I was looking at a piece of a video. It was an interview with six people. Three of them happened to be either present or former New Hampshire representatives who thought that illegal aliens were voting.
So that is not where this fear of undocumented people voting comes from.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, like most people, think, like most people are under the impression that if you are someone who is not a citizen, you can't vote. Like the knowledge that in some parts of the country, a very small handful, if you are a documented immigrant who's lived in the community for a while, you can vote for city council is one, it's fairly new. It's not something that's been around for a while. And two, it's very much not common knowledge. Later on, I'm going to see if I can find an article that talks about the places where you can. I think it's usually only in immigrant heavy communities where, like, there's a reasonable, I guess, sort of knowledge of the community for people to be like, yeah, if you live in the community, you're affected by the city council people, you're affected by your local government. You should have a say in that, which is a very reasonable position, which is part of the reason it's not a common thing. This country isn't known for reasonable policies.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
We don't have a history of being rational people.
Yeah, and that's a thing that saddens me extremely. I want to make sure. Yeah, I did drop that volume when I burst into laughter there. That's one of the problems with my audio that I haven't figured out yet. Um, and a lot of the things I'm seeing over in the side chat would be interesting to bring up. I mean, we might touch on them here, but it would be interesting to discuss them in depth in an after show. If you do you mind sticking around for a while?
I actually don't mind. I can't stay around for a super long period of time, but I can definitely stay around until like two.
Oh, great. Okay. So if you guys in the side there um, would like it, yeah, we can do that. But let's touch on some of the things here, get them started. Um, One of the things that Bionic Dance, one of the things that Kate said, voting needs to be made easier. It needs to be made needs to be made convenient. Um, thoughts and feelings.
I strongly agree. The reality is that the right to vote should be one, it should be enshrined for every citizen. And this isn't always like a super popular opinion. I go around in a lot of circles where people think that like maybe it should only be educated people who vote, which is like that's a surprisingly common opinion. Just how I never realized just how popular that idea was until I started being in more policy oriented and academic circles. I'm not a big fan of that idea. I can understand where it comes from, but I feel like it ignores all the biases that educated people have.
Okay.
And there's a
Yeah.
lot of biases that educated people have.
Oh yeah.
So some of these biases have like, they come from a reasonable place, but they're still kind of dangerous.
Yeah. It amazes me how much that say somebody with a 4-year college degree can still be biased over. It's not the purview of the, if you'll excuse the phrase, ignorant and uneducated. I mean this in only the nicest way, really I do. But yeah, it's not only those who do not have all the information, but there are a lot
So
more.
Doc Fearsome just asked a perfectly fair question. Ranked choice voting is a system of voting where you vote for more than one person,
Hmm.
but you rank out the candidates that you are voting for in order of preference. In a lot of places, you don't actually vote for every single person in like a system of ranked choice voting. You just vote for the candidates that you most support.
Yeah,
And
say
it's
the
not
best 3 out of 5
extremely
or something.
common, it's not extremely common, but it exists in a few other countries. So
I believe it exists in a handful of jurisdictions here in the U.S. Does it not? I mean, nothing at the federal level.
let me check because I'm actually not sure. It might exist. I that's This is not something that I know a whole lot about. I've read about it. I just haven't like done a whole lot of research. Oh, it actually does. It does exist in a few places. Yeah, in the United States. There are a couple of cities that have implemented it in local level elections. There's in Maine, it was used for, in 2016, I'm reading off of Ballotpedia. I'm just going to read it word for word.
Sure.
In 2016, Maine voters approved the Maine Ranked Choice Voting Initiative, which provided for the use of ranked choice voting in elections for the United States senators, representatives, the governor, state senators, and state representatives.
Oh,
Nice.
okay. I didn't realize that it had extended that far up, which is a good thing. Um, let's see what else. Yeah, let's see what else we've got here. We've got. I see Kate saying yes with a exclamation point to Christy Santiago, and I need to see what that was an answer to.
I think it was about RVC
Oh, okay, fine.
or RCV.
Yeah, I'm actually a proponent of RCV. It looks to be probably the best of the alternatives to me. Another thing I'd like to see is if we couldn't do a better job of districting, trying to find a way to, if not eliminate, reduce gerrymandering.
I strongly agree with you. It's just that there's one party whose whole platform hinges upon a whole lot of gerrymandering, and
Who
until
would
those
that be? I
people
have
are,
no idea.
who could the people? Could it be the racists? And that's not to say that like the Democrats aren't also racist, but like a lot of Republican candidates have a little bit of racism, and in some cases, a lot of racism embedded in their platform from the very start. It's like
Mm-hmm.
automatic.
Oh my! And again, education. Smitty just said a little bit ago, just educate everybody. Also, people don't need to be top level scholars to understand policy. He adds, when Bernie talks, people understand. Okay, we got two things going here. Yeah, number one, how do you get a decent educational system? Because I look at education here in the U.S., and I'm thinking of public education, that sort of thing, and it may not encompass everything Smitty's got in mind, but this has got to be one of the worst systems I've ever seen. Um,
So the issue isn't even okay. At the top level, at colleges, at public universities, the issue isn't the actual quality of education, it's accessibility. At the
right.
lower levels, it's both, which
Yeah.
is a serious problem.
Yeah. Because accessibility, I mean, even recently, my ex was totally pissed off. She wanted to go back to school and simply couldn't afford it. Um, when I was when I was in school this second time around, this last time, tuition was $5,000 a year. By the time Melody was looking at going back to school, it was closer to 20,000. And for somebody who's in her mid 40s and is probably not going to get a high-paying job out of the education. You're just going to get the education because you want to get it. How are you going to pay for that? Yeah, that sort of thing. And then the other thing that Smitty had said is when Bernie talks, people understand. Okay, what about the Bernie phenomenon? He took the place by storm in 2016. I'm thinking it was kind of sad that he didn't get the nomination. But what's happened since then, as far as he's concerned?
So Bernie, oh man, I sure wish Bernie had won the nomination.
You
I
and I
voted for
both.
Bernie. I'm more critical of Bernie now than I was before. If he wins the nomination, I'd be thrilled because I'm still like I'm more critical of Bernie than I was before. He has a history of not being very good on race, which is a thing that really matters. It's a very important thing to not be that good on, especially because it's not very hard to be good on race.
Right.
But Bernie is so much better than all of the other candidates, aside from maybe Julian Castro, who right now is the person I'm probably going to vote for in the primary. But if either one of them win, I'd be happy, and I'm almost certainly going to vote for whoever wins the Democratic nomination because I wish we had more options, but we don't.
Okay. Let me put it. Well, I hate to have this word come out of my mouth, but let me put it to you straight.
Okay.
You get where I'm going.
I
with
like
that.
how we're two queer folks
Yeah.
talking about straightness right now. Just give it. Tell me the news, Doc.
But
Give it to me.
I would vote for the dead cat that won the Democratic nomination. Okay, and I know there are a lot of people out there, at least one of them in the audience, who disagrees with that. Um, and might be something that we can talk about in the after show. But this, to me, is a first step. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's a first step in getting there.
I'm responding to a comment right now.
Oh, yay.
But so I'm gonna say this here. Bernie knows civil rights. That is not the same thing as being good on race.
Mhm.
And that said, he's the best candidate on race in among everyone. So you know what? I'm not saying he's not. I'm saying that in the grand scheme of things, there is more to race than understanding basic civil rights.
Right.
And among other things, as a Hispanic person with family who live in Puerto Rico, there's the statehood and independence thing, and the idea that, like, you need to care about Puerto Rico, which is true.
Yes.
If you want to be president, you need to care about Puerto Rico. You should care about Puerto Rico no matter what. And Bernie does care about Puerto Rico. He has a weird history there, too. But Bernie is not very good on immigration, which is a really important thing. Bernie has consistently voted against certain really important immigration reforms. He has not voted against every single one of them, but he's far from the best Democrat on that issue. He's also not a Democrat, which is something that frustrates me as a Democrat.
It frustrates a lot of Democrats.
And the thing is, you don't have to be a Democrat. I'm not going to make this a Bernie debate because I voted for Bernie. I would vote for Bernie in a heartbeat. I am saying he could be a better candidate on certain really important issues, which is a
Yeah.
perfectly fair thing to say.
Oh, absolutely.
But I would happily vote for Bernie Sanders, both in the primary and in the general. I'm just saying he's not the most amazing politician who's ever lived, although I would say that he's one of the better ones. Bernie is my guy. I like him a lot. I
Well,
just wish he was better.
he got me fired up in
He got me fired
political
up too.
things.
He got the person I was dating at the time fired up. We both went out and we spoke. We spoke for him. We advocated for him. We got other people to go out and vote for him. We were fired up. I'm still fired up. If he wins, I would be very happy.
It's amazing when I try to no, not try when I start to compare him to somebody I also remember, and yeah, the to look at the two of them, they're very different. One was a dashing young man, and then there's Bernie who couldn't keep his hair combed. And I'm thinking Bernie and JFK, but the phenomena were similar, uh, where you had that groundswell of enthusiasm, of interest um, associated with the two of them. And if we could just keep that into the coming presidential cycle, maybe we could get somewhere. I don't know. Okay,
I agree.
Doc Fearsome says I am not a Democrat, but I'm definitely voting Democratic this time. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, yeah, I agree with you there, Luciano. Yeah, needs to be better on foreign policy.
In foreign policy, like if you are a president, if people were pragmatic and understood what the president does, a lot of people would be willing to vote for president solely on the basis of foreign policy. Because that is, in a lot of ways, that is the area where the president has the strongest amount of power,
Yes.
that and the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
But not every candidate, not every single president gets to elect the same number of Supreme Court justices. But the president is like the person for foreign policy.
Yeah. And that's where we really screwed up this last time because Donald Trump was appealing to the domestic base, but I don't know anyone who could have been worse as a foreign policy person, as a diplomat. Um, look what he did as far as alienating us from the rest of the world. But that's another story entirely. Um, if well, Doc Fearsome, a question I'm going to ask you is: are the primary elections where you are open or closed?
Really good question.
Because
We probably should talk. We started talking about the Mueller report, and I like the direction this went in, but I think it's funny that we are where we are now.
yeah, is there? We're coming to the top of the hour. Is there anything else you want to throw in about the Mueller report to get us back on track, and then we can pick up some of this stuff in an after show? How's that sound?
So, okay, it's worth noting that the Mueller report was never really intended for the public. The purpose of a special counsel investigation is to send a report to the Attorney General. The Democrats were very, very good, and this was something that Trump was actually really bad at. Trump went out of the way for this to become an issue that the public cared about. If he hadn't said anything, and if the Democrats had been the only people screaming into the void about the importance of this report, odds are people wouldn't have cared as much. Also, people don't care. Like, the reality is, so far what we've heard from the Mueller report has not affected, at the very least not super affected, what people think of Trump. And that makes sense, but it's also kind of unfortunate because we should care about the circumstances under which a president got elected.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes sense that the way things are right now, at the very least what we know, haven't compelled people to care a whole lot. And the Democrats are not helping themselves by talking about this the way they are,
Oh,
although some
absolutely.
of them are smarter about this and are framing this not as a we need to impeach Trump issue, but as a transparency issue, which is a good thing.
Yes,
That's
yes.
smart.
If there's anything, we do need that transparency because we need trust in our institutions. And I don't know that we have that right now.
We don't. And that makes sense, but it's unfortunate, especially because like that was one of the things Trump wanted. Trump doesn't want us to trust in our institutions. He wants us to feel like this is a broken rig system, which it is. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying we shouldn't feel that way, but also if we feel that way and we're compelled to be pessimistic by it, then we play into his hands. If we feel that way and we are furious about it and we want to change it, then we are aiding in the pursuit of justice.
Yeah, and that's a very
So,
important thing.
yeah.
Oh, I understand. I understand, Kate. Yeah, she says I registered Democrat only to vote in the primary, but I'm not really a Democrat, not in my heart. I get that absolutely, um, and that's not a bad thing. Let me set up a link here, and
It's
then
after party time, guys.
second, huh?
It's after party time, guys.
Yeah, there you go. You got the party, then you got the after party, and then you got the after party. Oh my word! I remember a while back there was, yeah, it turned into a 24-hour after party. That was fun. No, that was not one of mine. That was, if anybody remembers Another Freaking Atheist. We had his usual after show, and then talked him into doing 2 more 8-hour shifts, and it was crazy. Um, yeah, you like that? Hey, Christy, the click clack. Now, I hear you. Are you another person with the buckling spring keyboard?
Me, I
Yeah.
am, well, I do have I have a loud keyboard if that's what you're asking, but I wasn't clicking on it just now.
Oh, okay. Because I have the buckling spring keyboard, which everybody has commented on. Yeah, because it's got that distinctive sound, and I have that keyboard because this most resembles the keyboards I cut my teeth on. Um, I actually cut my teeth on teletype machines, but what came next very much resembled the IBM Model M keyboards of 30 years ago. And what I have right now is actually a modern retooling of that. But that's also in keeping with the topic of today's show, isn't it? Uh, all right
I hope
then.
the after show talks about justice because like that's really what we should be talking about if we're talking about like results and pragmatism from the Mueller report.
Oh, absolutely. Why don't you, Luciano, let everybody know what you are up to next and where to go to find it?
So I run a YouTube channel called Lucianos Logic, which is in the title of this video. I do a lot of videos on a whole bunch of different things. Wonder Lady, Christy Santiago, and I are starting up the live streams up again this week. I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to be releasing a new video either tomorrow or Tuesday, where I sort of foreshadow the topic we're going to be talking about either this week or next week. Um, I'm I'm 90% sure it's this week. Might be wrong.
Okay, then. And if you guys would have a look in the description of this wonderful video, and I'll copy the link address and put it up in the side chat. This is where you can find Luciano's. Oh, okay. Thank you, Casey. She got to it before I did.
Thanks, Casey.
For the link to Luciano's channel, and yeah, by all means, get over there, do the subscribe thing, smush the like button, all that stuff, and he really deserves the support. Good, he's darn good at it. And okay, then what we can do on my clock, I have 12:56, which is pretty darn close to the top of the hour here, and I hope that some of the senators and representatives are listening in at some point on this show and on the after show, because they need to know, and I want you guys in the side chat to really pound on this. They need to know that we're interested in all of this. They need to know that we care. They need to know what we're after, what we want. So let's get on that and let's not stop. So in the meantime, why don't we get ready and go on over to the other place here? Let me get the after show link again and put that up on the side. Here it comes in the side chat. This is where we can all go to have some after party fun. And okay,
I'll see you guys
until we
soon.
get there, I'm going to say, thank you, Luciano, for coming here, and thank you for coming to the after show. And to everybody else, thanks a lot, troops. See you on the other side.